Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2024 Prometheus Award ceremony, in which we present our annual awards for Best Novel and Hall of Fame. I'm William Stoddard, president of the Libertarian Futurist Society, which sponsors the awards. It's my pleasure to introduce Michael Grossberg, our secretary and the chair of our Best Novel Committee, to announce that part of the ceremony. Michael?
The Prometheus Awards, one of the oldest fan-based SF fantasy awards after the Hugos and Nebulas, are unique in recognizing speculative fiction that dramatizes the perennial conflict between liberty and power. That includes not only science fiction and fantasy, but also alternate history, mythology, fable, horror, and near-future high-tech thrillers, so long as they explore the possibilities of a freer and better future based on voluntary cooperation and exchange instead of institutionalized coercion and tyranny. Since the Prometheus Award for Best Novel was first presented in 1979 to F. Paul Wilson's Wheels Within Wheels, 45 novels have won this annual category, with their authors receiving its distinctive, increasingly valuable Gold Prize. Among the more notable winners, L. Neil Smith's The Probability Brooch, James Hogan's Voyage from Yesteryear, Ken MacLeod's The Stone Canal, Werner Vinge's A Deepness in the Sky, Donald Kingsbury's Psychohistorical Crisis, Terry Pratchett's Night Watch, Neil Stephenson's The System of the World, Cory Doctorow's Little Brother, Sarah Hoyt's Dark Ship Thieves, Travis Corcoran's The Powers of the Earth, Barry Longyear's The Hook, and last year, Australian Tasmanian author Dave Freer's Cloud Castles. This year's slate of Best Novel finalists also encompass a wide range of entertaining and thought-provoking fiction. More than most authors, Prometheus-winning writers tend to be more sensitive to the considerable harm that the institutionalized coercion of the state has done throughout history in violating human rights and undermining peace, prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. At the same time, they're more likely to appreciate the great potential of free men and women to cooperate in producing, creating, innovating, and voluntarily working together to meet the very considerable challenges of surviving and thriving on our planet. One SF writer who deeply understands the power of liberty and the dangers of unlimited power over others is Victor Koman, one of the very few writers to win the Prometheus Award for Best Novel 3 times, for The Jehovah Contract, Solomon's Knife, and Kings of the High Frontier. Victor has been a vital member of the first generation of avowedly libertarian SF writers of the 1970s and 1980s. I am proud to introduce Victor, who now, for the first time, will have the long overdue honor of presenting the Prometheus Award for Best Novel. Welcome, Victor, to the 2024 Prometheus ceremony.
Thanks, Michael. It's hard for me to grasp that the first Prometheus Award was granted 45 years ago by the originator of the award, L. Neil Smith, to F. Paul Wilson for Wheels Within Wheels. Paul's still with us, but Neil passed away almost exactly 3 years ago. In those 45 years, in addition to Neil Smith, we've lost a number of winners. Poul Anderson in 2001, James Hogan in 2010, Sir Terry Pratchett in 2015, Dr. Jerry Pournelle in 2017, Victor Milan in 2018, which really hurt because he was only 6 days my senior. And my close friends within weeks of each other, J. Neil Schulman and Brad Lineweaver, both 5 years ago this August, back in 2019. And last year, Michael Flynn, and just this last March, Werner Vinge. Perhaps the fact that I just turned 70 causes me to reflect on mortality. But I like to think back to that great philosopher who meditated on, and I quote, the significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there's a great significance to the passage of time. There's such a great significance to the passage of time when you think about a day in the life of our children, unquote. So profound. But addle-pated status aside, it is our children, both literally and metaphorically, for whom we write. As members of the Libertarian Futurist Society, We read and we write about a future of freedom and the constant battle between tyranny and liberty, collectivism and individuality, dark ages and Renaissance. There's one weapon in that battle of which I'm personally proud. In 1997, my novel Kings of the High Frontier won the Prometheus Award despite not having been published in any traditional format, neither hardback nor paperback nor magazine serialization. Kings was published in digital format by Neil Schulman's Pulpless.com and sold exclusively as a download from the nascent World Wide Web. It was the first purely digital novel to win a major literary award and paved the way for many more non-traditional publication routes to reaching readers without middlemen or gatekeepers, such as desktop publishing, print on demand, ebooks, and so forth. Think about it. For the first time in the history of the written word, book length didn't matter. As I pointed out in my 1997 acceptance speech for Kings of the High Frontier, Neil didn't have to buy paper or glue, or pay for typesetting, or arrange for warehousing or shipping. He wasn't concerned that I had several full-color illustrations. He didn't have to shoot plates or pay for color proofs or separations. He simply had to come up with a way to allow people to buy a digital copy of the book over the internet and download it immediately. The cost of publishing a novel plummeted. Now Kindle readers and EPUB versions of books abound and are considered valid avenues for publication. Nearly all our nominees for novels this year would not have been considered legitimately published 30 years ago. But in the 21st century, they have found their way almost directly from writer to reader. And now the Libertarian Futurist Society stands ready for the 44th time, or 43rd, I'm looking at you, 1985, to honor an author for a novel of speculative fiction that champions individual rights based on the moral legal principle of non-aggression as the ethical and practical foundation for peace, prosperity, progress, justice, tolerance, mutual respect, civility, and civilization itself. Here are the 5 novelists for the Prometheus Award for Best Novel. After I take a sip of this. Devin Erickson's Theft of Fire, set mostly on an asteroid mining ship diverted to reach what may be hidden alien technology, is a chamber-sized space opera set within an anarcho-capitalist contract-based frontier where industrialization, colonization, and free market innovations have spread throughout the solar system in a freewheeling future that offers insights into personal agency, ethics, free will, property rights, and other individual rights. Carl K. Gallagher's Swim Among the People is the 5th novel of his Fall of the Censor series about the fight against an interstellar empire that maintains totalitarian power through censorship, suppression of history, destruction of older books, and other less savory methods. Against this occupation, a voluntary covert organization seeks to preserve and disseminate forbidden knowledge. God's Girlfriend by Gordon Hanka, writing as Dr. Insensitive Jerk, a fellow PhD, I presume, is the 5th and final novel in his subversive and satirical Gaia's Wasp series. The book raises prickly questions about coercion, consent, sainthood, morality, masculinity, femininity, and the use of weapons of mass destruction amid a taboo-smashing clash of 2 cultures, Earth humans and worms, human refugees from another planet. In Howard Andrew Jones's Lord of a Shattered Land, a grief-stricken former military general risks his life to free the enslaved remnants of his free trading people, traveling through a brutal empire filled with human and inhuman dangers, all while embracing a libertarian ethic of non-aggression. This epic sword and sorcery fantasy reveals the clash between the evils of slavery and tyranny amid the eternal human passion for liberty and individuality. Finally, David Suarez's Critical Mass is his sequel to Delta V and concerns heroic near-future astropreneurs mounting a rescue of colleagues marooned on an asteroid. To save them, they must battle nature and governmental impediments in an audacious mission to mine an asteroid, complete the first spin gravity space station, build a nuclear powered spaceship, promote the commercialization of the solar system, and create a secure, decentralized currency in the course of proving that space based industry is not just profitable, but is humanity's last best hope for a survivable, peaceful, and prosperous future for all. And the winner of this year's Prometheus Award for Best Novel is Daniel Suarez for Critical Mass. Congratulations to Daniel and all of this year's finalists.
Thank you, Victor. It is wonderful to receive this award, especially for a novel that means so much to me. First, my thanks to the Libertarian Futurist Society, both for the principles this Prometheus Award represents, and also for awarding it to me in a pivotal year for freedom of expression in science fiction. Authoritarianism is on the march once more, and the first step in resisting it is to be free in one's own thoughts and imagination. That is, after all, where sci-fi lives, and the LFS is helping to keep free-thinking science fiction alive. I also want to praise the selection process for this award. If there is a central theme to all of my books, it's how we retain human agency in the face of rapid technological change. However, there was no orthodoxy demanded of me for this award. I was not required to belong to any particular group or political party. My work was allowed to speak for itself. That's refreshing in this day and age, and I'm honored to accept this award from the LFS. Critical Mass was a labor of love for me. It's the second novel in a planned trilogy, a trilogy that chronicles humanity's journey from a finite, earthbound civilization to a dynamic and spacefaring one. Like the first book, Delta V, Critical Mass is a novel that I felt compelled to write. Growing up, I devoured science fiction. Niven, Clarke, Heinlein, Asimov, and so many other authors. Science fiction was my escape into potential futures. It made me think, made me want to learn about science and engineering, and gave me a feeling that wondrous achievements were within our reach. In short, that the future could be better than the present. Unfortunately, many people no longer think that's true. Years ago, I asked myself, how could we reach that science fiction future we so often imagine? Not just as a story, but for real. How do we make that leap to a thriving, sustainable, spacefaring civilization? So over the past decade, I met with scientists, space entrepreneurs, investors, technologists, astronauts, adventurers, government officials, and many more to learn what was possible in deep space using our existing technology. And beyond the engineering, how do we prevent despotic governments and individuals from dominating space settlement? Also, how do we extend the economic opportunity of space to billions of people remaining here on Earth, while simultaneously preserving Earth's biosphere and our democratic institutions? Science fiction allows us to explore these complex questions, and it's why I wrote Critical Mass and Delta V, to create a present-day narrative for how we can build a livable, prosperous, and free civilization in deep space, where 1 billion new ideas can be explored on a limitless frontier. And I didn't shy away from adding technological and scientific detail to these books because my aim was not only to entertain readers, but also to inspire our next generation of entrepreneurs, investors, technicians, and explorers to pursue bold goals in deep space, to build an off-world economy. That's why I'm thrilled when I receive messages from readers who tell me that Critical Mass or Delta V inspired them to pursue a career in the space industry, or when students write to say that they're now taking space-related majors, or when space industry professionals recommend my books. This gives me hope that I might be helping to inspire others about our future. Because compelling science fiction really can make a difference in people's lives. One event in particular brought this home to me. Back in 2016, I was a guest author at ElsterCon, a science fiction conference in Leipzig, Germany. Leipzig, of course, was formerly part of communist East Germany. ElsterCon sticks in my memory, first because the organizers and attendees were wonderful, but also because I was assigned a translator, since the second language of many older East Germans was not English, but Russian. At one point, an older gentleman showed me shelves of Cold War-era sci-fi paperbacks, and through my translator, he explained that science fiction saved his life during the time of the Stasi secret police. He and his friends shared dangerous ideas through pulp sci-fi novels about distant worlds. Unlike so-called serious literature, pulp science fiction novels were not deemed a threat by the regime, but those novels helped him imagine a better future. He said they kept his hope alive, and that's what kept him alive. And his story has stayed with me. Because here in 2024, science fiction is not considered a substandard art form. It is mainstream and respectable. In fact, it's a critical forum for ideas. And for that reason, it's become a target of authoritarian censorship. That is the risk to science fiction today. We've seen it, and recently. There's a struggle for control of our vision for the future, and also a struggle over who gets to tell what story. This struggle is between all authors and readers against self-appointed authoritarian interests, whether they're dictatorial governments, intolerant social movements, or monolithic corporations. It makes no difference. In each case, they seek to control the frame for imagining. We cannot have our imaginations chained within the bounds established by self-appointed authorities. We must be free to imagine new futures and to honestly assess our past and present. That is what artistic expression is for. And that is why I am sincerely grateful for this Prometheus Award. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. For this part of the ceremony, I'm speaking in my other capacity as chair of the Hall of Fame Committee, which selects finalists from this year's nominees for the Hall of Fame Award. We began giving Hall of Fame awards in 1982 with awards to two libertarian classics, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, a key work for the emergence of the modern-day libertarian movement, and Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, the foundational work of libertarian science fiction and still one of its best. In recent years, as earlier Prometheus Award nominees have become old enough to be regarded as classics, we've adopted a requirement that Hall of Fame nominees must have been published at least 20 years ago and must not have won the Best Novel Award. In his elegy for William Butler Yeats, the English poet W.H. Auden wrote that time that is intolerant of the brave and innocent and indifferent in a week to a beautiful physique worships language and forgives everyone by whom it lives. Our Hall of Fame Award honors works and authors that have attained this kind of longevity and that still have something to say to libertarians now, in a time when libertarian voices are increasingly desperately needed. This year's Hall of Fame Award will be presented by Robert Poole, Jr., a co-founder of the Reason Foundation, one of the organizations advocating libertarian approaches to public policy. He has written on a variety of issues from a libertarian viewpoint, primarily emphasizing transportation policy, and is the author of Rethinking America's Highways, published 2018. Poole is an LFS member of long standing and an active participant in our selection of award winners. We're very pleased to have him joining us to present this year's award for classic libertarian fiction.
Thanks, Bill. I am just delighted to be here today. This is an organization that I love. With a full-time job, I don't get to read as many science fiction works each year as I would like to, but it gives me some clues as to which ones I might actually make the time to read, which I love to do. My involvement with this organization dates back to the very first Prometheus Award, as Michael mentioned, in September 1979, held at as adjunct to the Libertarian Party's National Convention that year. And it almost didn't happen. I had to fight a battle with the convention director, Ed Crane, who thought that having an award for space cadets was frivolous and not in keeping with the serious aims of the Libertarian Party. But he gave in at the last minute and the award went on. So the 2024 Hall of Fame finalists are four. They're all worthy of note and all in my library. Orion Shall Rise by Poul Anderson, one of my longtime favorites in addition to Heinlein. The Trees, a song by the Canadian rock group Rush, which I've always enjoyed. Between the Rivers by Harry Turtledove, and The Truth by Terry Pratchett, which is the 2024 award winner. I'm pretty sure I first discovered Terry Pratchett by reading The Truth, which introduced me to his whole Discworld series. And it was a finalist, but didn't win Best Novel in 2001. That makes it eligible, it turns out, for the Hall of Fame. It introduced me to his invented kind of medieval fantasy city of Ankh-Morpork, where I have just enjoyed so many adventures in very inventive stories, but always in ways that try to expose ideas that lead to political coercion, that try to suppress things that other people might find as dangerous, and so forth. I'm not generally a fan of fantasy as opposed to pure science fiction, but this series just got to me, and I enjoy them tremendously. I think this is a form of political satire, basically, and extremely well done. Every Discworld novel provides new ways in which Pratchett slyly, this is not heavy-handed, it's built into the structure of the story and in the language that he uses. The Truth is a great example because a story about the introduction of the first ever newspaper in this sort of semi-medieval society. And you can imagine what a radical idea it is to many people. Who gave you the authority to write this stuff? And those that's dramatized very nicely throughout the pages of the story. And it's a major struggle to actually make this a success. And unfortunately, the truth will out and the newspaper succeeds. He's a wonderful wordsmith also, Pratchett is, and he plays games with language and assumptions that people are sometimes embedded in the things people say. They don't realize what they're saying. And as a longtime writer and editor myself, I love discovering little gems that are part of the fun in reading these novels. I have to confess, as busy as my career has led me, I have read fewer than a dozen of the Discworld books. The good side of that is that there are many, many more that I hope to read all of in the days ahead. And I, in fact, have several that I'm taking with me on a trip to Europe next month. Needless to say, I voted for Truth when I voted on the awards, and I'm delighted that it is our 2024 Hall of Fame winner. Thanks.
Regrettably, Terry Pratchett cannot be with us to accept his award, but rather than talk about him, I'd like to quote some relevant words of his own. In 2003, when our Best Novel award went to his novel Night Watch, he spoke about Lord Vetinari, the patrician of Ankh-Morpork, the Discworld's greatest city. And what can he tell himself? Only that whoever you fight for, the damn government always gets in. That when lawlessness walks the streets, the authorities will bend all their efforts to keeping honest men unarmed. They possibly don't see it that way, but can never quite grasp the fact that criminals don't obey the law, the cads, and that policemen are sometimes tempted into being sheepdogs who prefer to keep the flock corralled rather than protect it from the predators because it's easier to bite sheep than wolves. He learns that the people who declare that the innocent have nothing to fear are wrong, because the innocent certainly should fear. They fear the guilty, and especially they fear and distrust and fight the kind of people who say the innocent have nothing to fear. So am I a libertarian? We don't have that tradition in England, where just about every politician would classify themselves as a libertarian, and each one would mean something different. But currently we have a government that lacks wisdom, perspective, or talents, is centrist, arrogant, and talks incessantly about rights while it curtails freedoms. I see fragments of Night Watch all around me. So right now, I'm feeling very libertarian indeed. We might note that this is even more chillingly true now than it was 2 decades ago. And in The Truth, in a final conversation between the patrician and the novel's hero, William de Worde, he sums up its theme with admirable brevity. In return, however, said the patrician, I must ask you not to upset Commander Vimes. He gave a little cough, more than necessary. I'm sure we can pull together, sir. Lord Veterinary raised his eyebrows. Oh, I do hope not. I really do hope not. Pulling together is the aim of despotism and tyranny. Free men pull in all kinds of directions. He smiled. It's the only way to make progress. Thank you for those words, Sir Terry, and for the delightful story that contains them. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, Bill. That was a good quote. We're now open if people want to talk, converse, whatever. I'm really pleased, Bob and Daniel and Victor, that you were able to join us. This was really fun.
It was fun. Hopefully my sound came through okay.
No, you were good.
Good. And thank you again.
If anybody
Great
needs
time.
to be unmuted,
Yeah.
apparently I'm the one who can do it.
Daniel, I have a question.
Sure.
What is your expected publication date for the third and final volume in the series?
Yeah, that's a great question. I cast a broad net with this one, so I'm still doing the research for it. And also there's some other things going on with my work's influxes over at Sony Pictures, so I'm occasionally pulled into that.
Mm-hmm.
So I will crow about it the moment I know.
Okay, very good.
You know, part of it is I don't want to get hooked into a contract necessarily just yet because I want to keep it open-ended. That doesn't mean it's going to slow down me doing it, but that does mean I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay.
But thank you for asking. I'm glad you want to see the third book. So do I.
I've read them all, and I'm really glad to hear Influx is going to be a film. That's terrific.
Well, we'll see. I'll knock wood, but
Okay.
you know, I have 4 drafts of scripts from previous efforts, so we shall see.
Yep. Robert Heinlein had that same problem.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
the fact that Hollywood is interested doesn't mean there will be a movie.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. One thing I will say, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress was one of the first books I went back and reread before I started any of these. I just love it so much.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
There's an interesting note to this. I actually wrote about it for our blog a few months ago. In reading the Virginia edition of Heinlein, I read the 2 volumes on his work for Hollywood, for the film and television industries. And I discovered a series. The last series he tried to write for in the 1960s was an espionage series set in a future lunar society. And he ended up pulling it because he despaired of getting the producers to understand what he was aiming at in the stories. But a lot of the ideas and the background building of that early script and the Bible he wrote for it turned out to play a direct role in his working out the setting for The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
There you go.
So he did a careful job of salvaging what he'd come up with. Yet you see a lot of hints about what he was thinking about when he wrote The Moon is a Harsh Mistress in there. So
Interesting.
That's great.
I'd like to thank everyone for not putting me on the spot for asking when the next novel in the High Pilgrimage will come out after 30 years.
But you told me that you're actually, after a period of working in your career and getting a PhD, you're actually writing another novel now.
Yes, I am. I don't know if it fits into the Kings of the High Frontier universe, but it might. It takes place far enough in the future that it could. So we'll see if I can crowbar it in or just let it stand on its own. But I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to jinx it.
Well, I can't wait to reach the next Daniel Suarez novel and the next Victor Koman novel.
We'll keep working on them.
Absolutely.
I had reread Delta V before starting Critical Mass, just to refresh my memory, and I enjoyed it very much. And one of the reasons we read previous books is because we really want to give the Prometheus Award, #1, to the work, not the person, regardless of what their own personal views are, as the text itself. But then second, we want something to be a standalone, something that works, even if you haven't read the previous or succeeding stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I have a pet peeve. There's a lot of writers who write good stuff, but they assume with the way they've written the sequel that you've read the previous one. All you have to do is have a little weaving in some expository stuff, or even have a prefatory chapter.
Yeah,
which
I
some
call it a
people do.
prologue. That's what I do.
All you have to do so that people can read it. Why doesn't everybody do that?
That's right. It even helps me.
Right.
I'm sure it's not easy to summarize the whole novel in terms of, you're so
It can
enmeshed with
verge
it.
on Maid and Butler if you're not careful, and so you try to hide the scaffolding, as we say. That's one thing, Bob, you were talking about time to read fiction. That's my big pet peeve is I used to have much more time to read fiction. Now I find I'm mostly reading for research, a lot of nonfiction. And then, of course, I'll be sent some books to blurb. I'm really looking forward to the next quiet time I have to sit back and go read some new fiction that I really want to get to.
That's understandable.
Including yours, Victor, and more Terry Pratchett. Of course, it's been years since I've read a lot of it too. And I sort of, in a picaresque way, would go here and there in the series. So
That's what I've done.
yeah.
One of the
I found
reasons.
that when I go back to read some of my earlier writing in order to, catch up and write further, I'll sit there and I'll read and I go, wow, I'm not, it's almost as if I hadn't written it myself. I'm reading it and I'm going, actually not bad.
I've been there. That's great. It's good when you say, hey, I'm not bad, instead of,
Yeah.
oh, gosh, this is terrible.
Doesn't stink as bad as I thought I wrote.
Yeah, you get that perspective because you've changed so much over the time. But
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I'm glad that we recognize Terry Pratchett, the late great Terry Pratchett, for a second time this year, is because he really makes me laugh. And how few novels actually make you smile and actually laugh out loud when you're alone. And then sometimes, because of the wordplay that Bob referred to, you want to read it out loud right then to just enjoy it a second time. How rare is that?
yeah.
And then the secondary reason, we now have a category on the Prometheus blog, where if you have an index on the left where you have different categories, we added comedy, a subset of our 105 Prometheus winners over the last, 44, 45 years. Maybe 20 of them have strong comic aspects, and to be able to get across truths and to tell an interesting story, and then on top of that to be funny, that's like the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Last year's
said in jest.
Yeah. Last year's Cloud Castles actually had a bunch of humor in it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes, and you should not forget the power of laughing at the state and its the people who run it. They really hate that.
That's why they're so humorless.
Yes. Yes, I do have to note that I am a connoisseur of Russian political jokes. The Russians have had the best political humor on earth for the past century and needed it.
Well, as a Jew who's also gay, and then became a third persecuted, misunderstood minority when I switched from being a Jewish liberal Democrat to being a libertarian, I see a link between the suffering of Jews and the suffering of Russians or anyone else under any form of tyranny, whether it's communism or socialism or the National Socialism under Hitler or the particular brand of socialism that avowed socialist Benito Mussolini name branded his Italian brand, fascism. It's all tyranny to me. And people, to survive that, have to find some dark gallows humor. And out of that duress, which I wish didn't happen, people come up with realistic jokes that they tell privately that involve courage. Because if it's repeated back to the rulers, I mean, I just read a story in the last month, truly happened under Joseph Stalin. There was, during his reign in the 40s and 50s, he gave a speech, and then people, everyone in the audience would all applaud forever for 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. There was one guy who, after like 3 minutes, stopped. Stalin noticed him, pointed him out. Can we say that that guy, quote unquote, disappeared? There are real risks to pointing out that the emperor has no clothes, which, by the way, Hans Christian Andersen's very libertarian fable was inducted into the Prometheus Hall of Fame back around the turn of this past century. And so humor, it's not just laughter is the best medicine, but humor is life-saving. And I immediately want to add, because having read Daniel's and Victor's novels, I also enjoy various serious, suspenseful, action-oriented, and realistic stories that give you a sense of what is really possible in the world. I don't need to laugh all the time. And sometimes just the thrill of reading a propulsive, suspenseful, well-told story like you guys write is a different kind of pleasure.
Yeah.
I've always appreciated humor. One of my favorite writers is Richard Armour, who would write these various histories, like It All Began with Columbus and so on. It All Began with Marx is a great satire of communism. And I wish I could write as humorously as some of these writers can, but I'm a humorless, or at least clumsy when it comes to humor.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna end the ceremony now. Appreciate your all's participation.
Yes, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris.
Pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks to all our nominees and winners.